I want to talk about this video right here. Radio Raheem interviews Deontay Wilder, and as you can see, the video title, it says, Deontay Wilder on killing and crippling fighters. So Radio Raheem asked him about those comments that Wilder made. Wilder does not deny that those comments are serious. He does not deny that he didn't make those comments in jest. He meant what he said. And all he does say to Radio Raheem about it is he said, well, look, this is not really a gentleman's sport. This gentleman thing only goes so far. We're fighters at the end of the day. When you get in that ring, it's serious. Your life is on the line. You can get seriously hurt. And this is what I said about Deontay Wilder and other fighters like him who have made similar comments, is their approach to being in such a violent, brutal sport is to be the most violent and brutal cats on the block. That's their approach. Deontay Wilder is not a stylist. He's not a slickster. He's not a Mayweather. He knows that for him to succeed at the top level, he has to be the most brutal guy. He has to be the hardest punching, the most vicious, the most ruthless. That's his lane. He understands that. And so his process is to be extreme, to be all the way violent. At the end of the day, the referee, the doctors, the cornermen, they are there to protect the fighters. It's not Deontay Wilder's responsibility to protect any fighter. It's his responsibility to go in there and eliminate the competition. So what goes on in his head is some pretty extreme stuff, throwing punches with bad intentions. That's what it is. And some people find that unpalatable, but that's the reality of boxing. Just because more fighters don't admit that these are their intentions, don't think that there are not plenty of other fighters out there who go into the ring with exactly those intentions, because there are. That's the reality of boxing. It's not a gentlemanly sport, in all truth. And Deontay Wilder says to Radio Raheem, well, look, people have said worse. You're trying to tell me that you've never heard anybody say any worse? And Radio Raheem says, no, actually, I haven't. Saying you'd kill a man in the ring is the worst I've ever heard. And he says, well, Deontay, if you want to give me an example of someone who said worse, then please do. And Deontay declines. He says, I ain't going to mention nobody's names, but, you know, people have said worse. And surely Deontay Wilder was thinking about Mike Tyson when he was saying that. Because Mike Tyson has definitely said worse. Yes, he has, people. Let's not play those games. Mike Tyson has said worse than what Deontay Wilder has said. Mike Tyson has talked about killing people in the ring. He's talked about ripping their heart out and feeding it to them. He's talked about eating people's children. He's talked about pushing the nose bone up into the brain. He's talked about killing Razor Ruddock in the rematch. If he don't die, it doesn't count. He's talked very candidly, as I mentioned many times before, about how early in his career when he was a young fighter, his ambition was to kill somebody in the ring so he could be like one of his heroes, the old-time fighters he used to watch, like Ray Robinson and Max Baer, who killed people in the ring. Yeah. Mike Tyson was an extreme guy. He came from an extreme environment at a time in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Was a very, very rough place to grow up. And he learned to survive in that environment by being extreme. Now, he could have been like his brother Rodney, stayed out of trouble, and Rodney went on to be, I think, a brain surgeon. But Mike Tyson was attracted to the street life in his neighborhood, and the street life was definitely all around him. His mom was even involved in street activity to some extent. All right, his mom and his friends, he said, would rob men when the men would come round to the house and stuff like that. And he said his mom was, I don't want to say he said his mom was a prostitute, but his mom was involved in sleeping with men for money in her house, and so were her friends, and sometimes they'd rob these men. So he came from a pretty messed up environment. Let's just put it that way, Mike Tyson. And his way of surviving in that environment was to be extreme. That was his way of dealing with his environment. Let's just put it that way. People find different ways of dealing with their environment. Tyson's way of dealing with his environment was to be extreme, was to be violent, because he was getting picked on all the time, Tyson. He was getting bullied. So he turned into the ultimate bully. And exactly the same thing in boxing. He was scared when he first started boxing. His solution to that was to turn himself into the very thing that he feared. is to be the monster. To conquer the monster, he turned himself into the monster. And that's where all them comments came from. That's where the punches with bad intentions came from and all that kind of thing. And with Deontay Wilder, I guess, I don't think he, as far as I'm aware, he didn't have as messed up a background as Mike Tyson, but a similar kind of process when it comes to surviving in the cutthroat world of professional boxing at the top level. He wants to be meaner than everybody else, more ruthless than everybody else, more extreme than everybody else in his mentality and I'm mixing my words up here, people, and in his intentions. That's what Wilder's trying to do. So, yeah, have a watch of the video. I mean, some of you guys are going to find it unpalatable for him to be saying this kind of thing. Some of you guys just disagree with me about boxing being this brutal sport. I just feel like we need to be honest about it. You know? I mean, we can make it as glossy and gentlemanly as we want on the surface, but we have to understand what really goes through the fighters' heads, what the fighters really feel when they get in the ring. They ain't being tickled in there. They're being punched in the face by an opponent who's got God knows what intentions on his mind. When you're in that situation at the highest level, where these guys punch hard and they're vicious and they're ruthless, somehow you got to psych yourself up for that type of situation to survive and thrive and succeed in that type of environment. So it is what it is, man. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel. And, you know, just to reiterate, I certainly don't condone Deontay Wilder bringing Dominic Breazeale's child into it. I thought that was way too low. Way too low. But the other stuff, I'm not condoning it. Him talking about crippling and killing fighters, I'm not condoning it at all. But what I am doing is I'm saying I ain't shocked by it. And Wilder is not the only guy who has these kind of intentions. And I'm not criticizing him for thinking those thoughts. No, that's not what I'm criticizing him for. I think you can criticize him maybe for saying what he said, or at least there's an argument to be made that you can criticize him for saying what he said, rather than keep, biting his tongue and just keeping it to himself. There's an argument to be made that he shouldn't have said it like that because it makes the sport of boxing look bad. There's definitely an argument for that, a debate to be had. All right, I'm not saying I definitely condemn it or condone it. I'm just saying there's a debate to be had there. But as far as the stuff about the kids, no, you shouldn't have mentioned Dominic Breazeale's child in that context. That was low. That was definitely low. Anyway, drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel about everything I've talked about in this video. All right, it's that, man. I'm out.